Alright, Daniel from these 7Cs. Now, I want to make a maintenance and cleaning video. So this is typically the steps that I take to take care of my knives. As you can see here, these are the tools that I usually use. I use a Militech for the lubricant, thread locker blue. I have some paper towels, Q-tips, and whatever tool that I need to take the knife apart. Star of the show is a Cortex XL. Now for this, I will need a T10, I believe, for the body screw. And then you'll also need a T8, I believe. Yep, a T8 for the pivot screw. So there you go. The Cortex XL and all the Brown knives are actually really easy to take apart. Usually it's like a 2-screw construction. So usually I'll go ahead and start to and also don't forget the rubbing alcohol. So I usually use the cap of the rubbing alcohol. I'll pour a little bit in there so I could, once I start taking stuff apart, I could just throw it in there and let it kind of soak, remove any grease and Loctite any debris, right? So let's go ahead. Usually start with the body screw. I think that's really a preference thing. I don't think it really matters. But from at least the videos that I've seen, a lot of the makers seems to take out the body screw first. So let's go ahead and do that. I break the tension and just, be slow and gentle, right? And that came out super easy. And let's go ahead and throw that into the rubbing alcohol. Next one, I'm going to switch it up for the T8 and go ahead and take out the pivot screw. Now I love that this is a captured pivot screw, so I don't need two different tool sets. But there you go, boom, super easy. The screw came off easy. I'll go ahead and throw that one also in the alcohol. And the knife should pretty much come apart. And sometimes you might have to shimmy it out a little bit. And there you go. And those are the internals of the knife. You can see that's the inset lock. You got those ceramic bearings. Craig Brown uses, I love his ceramic bearings. There's the other side of the pivot screw. Now, when I put in the rubbing alcohol, I like to make sure that there's no bubble because the bubble will prevent the rubbing alcohol to actually go into the crevice, right? So there you go. Anyways, those are all the different parts. And I'm going to just let it soak in there for a little while, and it makes the cleaning a lot easier. Now, I love the internals of a knife, as you can see. Like I said, it's an inset lock. Man, Craig Brown does some of the best inset locks I've experienced. And then there's a little Easter egg. There's a Cortex, the serial number, M for Magna Cut, and then the XL for the name. Man, I love when makers do stuff like this. They just makes a knife a little extra special. And of course, the blade, man. That hollow grind is just phenomenal. Now this is a really cool design because you could adjust the detent and the lockup by manipulating those two knobs. Craig Brown will provide you with the tool to do the adjustment. So anyways, let's start with the blade. I usually like to clean the blade out first, so I'll start cleaning out the locking area, the detent ball, and the pivot hole, the locking face. I like to clean that out. Sorry, I apologize if it goes off camera. Sometimes I just need to look a little bit more carefully. Yeah, just clean out all the crevices, man. Q-tips are a knife enthusiast's best friend. It gets into all the nook and crannies. Look at all that gunk, right? From the oil and I like to just, the rubbing alcohol. I feel like it breaks down material a lot better than anything else I've used. So there you go. I'm just slathering it all over the place, and it's really easy. It dries out super quick. It just evaporates. So yep, sorry again, off camera. There you go. I'm just cleaning, and I might just like fast forward some parts, but yeah, essentially I like to make sure I'm getting into all the nook and crannies, where all the debris and the oils can kind of sit and gather dust and lint and all that fun stuff, right? So there you go. I'm just going ahead and just cleaning it all out, all of it out. Making sure, yep, go on both sides. Look at that. Look at all that black gunk. In terms of like frequency of cleaning, it really depends on how often you use your knives and what you're cutting, right? If you're using your knife a lot, then you're gonna have to maintain your knife. I'd say like fairly often. But for the everyday like knife enthusiast like myself, I'd say probably, once a year, once every few months is perfect. So I'm cleaning out that's the lock bar. What do you call that? Like track. So yeah, just cleaning out the pivot area. I like to make sure like the pivot area is the cleanest part, because that's where a lot of the movement's happening, right? You got like the bearings, you got the lock bar, all in that area. So I just want to make sure all the nook and crannies are cleaned out. This one's fairly, this one's fairly clean. But there you go. I tell you, man, Q-tips they just make the job a lot easier. You know what I'm saying? If you haven't used Q-tips, man, go buy yourself a pack. It's fairly cheap. Now let's move it on to the inset lock. I like to clean out the lock face, the detent ball. Usually the gunk kind of just accumulates in that area. So I make sure it's super clean. Dip a little bit more of that rubbing alcohol. Now I'm cleaning that pivot, the counter bore areas, and there you go, right? So I'll say, yep, I like to take, time in making sure all that stuff is out. Boom. Yeah, there you go. So I'm just kind of doing a visual check to make sure I didn't miss anything. Also check to make sure that you don't have like a steel track. Sometimes it could be a separate piece that goes between the handle and the bearing. The Cortex XL doesn't have this bearing track or like a separate bearing track. So anyway, so there you go. It usually takes about 3 Q-tips for me to maintain one knife. Your mileage may vary. So I'm going to go ahead and now use a paper towel. I'm going to throw some rubbing alcohol on there. And I'm just going to clean the larger surface areas. So again, I start with the blade. Yeah, clean out just all the large surface areas, the fuller, the crown of the blade, just anything that I may have missed, so I just kind of doing a secondary kind of run through, take it, and making sure that I'm not missing anything, right? Again, one thing you want to know is if you're, depending on what kind of fabric or paper towel you're using, it may leave like fuzz. So just keep an eye out for that because, if you have a lot of fuzz, it can start gunking up the action as well. So just, make sure everything is actually clean. I'm going to throw some more rubbing alcohol now, and I'm now going to clean the inside of the scale. Yeah, there's not a lot of like nooks and crannies on the scale other than that pivot area, but just make sure wipe it all down nice and clean. I like to like usually take my knife apart if I'm getting it on the secondary market as well because I don't know what the previous owner has done with the knife, you know what I'm saying? So I like to always take it apart and oops, just knocked the camera. Anyway, so now I'm cleaning out the second scale with the inset lock. This one has a little bit more nook and crannies to deal with. Sorry, my camera is going a little wonky. I apologize. I'm going to have to readjust. So there you go. I left the backspacer on. To me, I don't feel the need to remove the backspacer. But there you go. That's up to you. Boom. I like to keep this as least painful and time consuming as possible. So there you go. I'm just cleaning it out. Fun. I don't know about you, but to me it's very therapeutic when I'm like cleaning and maintaining my knives. I put on a podcast or a movie in the background, and it's just very, very therapeutic. I love it. It actually also makes me appreciate the build quality of a knife and actually get to take a look inside of a knife, right? A lot of makers, companies, they do a lot of work on the outside, But I love when they actually take time to, do work on the inside, whether that's to throw in an Easter egg or do some intricate milling pattern for weight reduction. But anyway, there you go. Scales are clean. I think blade is good to go. Just doing another visual inspection before I start to put everything together. Again, I like to make sure the cleanest part is that pivot area on the blade and on the scales. So there you go, boom. Now we move on to the hardware. Hardware, just be careful with the hardware depending on how small and nimble these items are. I've many times I've dropped them on the carpet, and I've had a few scares where I thought I lost something. So just, be extra careful. I like to use a paper towel and just kind of rub off, just kind of rub off the rubbing alcohol. With the bearings, I'll kind of roll it between my fingers as I sandwich the paper towel. I just rub it just to kind of get all that off of the bearing bolts. Right, so there you go. Just kind of pinching it, rolling it. And if it's really dirty, like usually there'll be like black residue and whatnot. These seem fairly clean. There you go. And then moving on to the, let's go, this is the pivot screw. Again, I pinch it between the paper towel, just drive it then off. And then what I like to do with the screws is I like to actually rotate it and kind of pinch. What I'm doing with my left hand is I'm pinching the screw with the paper towel. So as I'm like, screwing it, see, is getting in between the threads and really cleaning it out. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but yeah, like I'll just rotate it using the tool and just really pinch the screw with the paper towel, and it really will get into the threads and just get out all that gunk. So I do it several times, depending. Sometimes it takes a few minutes to just get everything off, especially if you're going to reapply Loctite. You want to make sure that the surface area is clean and free of debris, or that Loctite's not going to cure correctly, and then of course you're going to start having loose pivots, and your centering is going to be off, action is going to be off, and it's going to be like, the lockup won't be that tight. But anyway, that's why I like to take a lot of time to make sure the pivot screw surface area is super clean. I do a lot of that visual inspection, so that looks good. Now I move on to the body screw. The body screw, I don't have to worry too much about it because I don't typically apply any Loctite to the body screw. I've never had any problems with it coming undone, and I've noticed that like makers typically will not apply any of that Loctite on the body screw either. But to each his own. If you want to make sure that it's not gonna come undone, then yeah, go for it. But to me, I never found the need to Loctite the body screw. But anyway, I like to clean it out anyway. See, I almost lost that screw. So that's that. And then now the other side of the pivot screw. This one is a little bit trickier. This one can take a little bit more time because usually the Q-tip is too big for it to go into the hole. You know what I'm saying? So what I'll do is actually you'll use the paper towel, and you'll see right now I'm just kind of cleaning out the surface area. This is what I like to do. So, and you may have a better technique, but see, I'm gonna go ahead and make like a sharp, like a little stick, and I'll dip it in the rubbing alcohol, and then I'll start to rotate that into the pivot screw and try to get it in between the threads, because there's going to be definitely dried up Loctite or whatever Loctite type material you're using, right? So it's all in there, so you have to take that out if you want to reapply any of that stuff. And yeah, see, super dirty. Yeah. And the reason why I actually took the Cortex apart, because as I noticed that the lock, that the pivot screw was getting looser and looser by the day, and so it looks like now I can see why. I don't think there was any Loctite on there, and it looks like there was some grease or oil that got in between the threads, so there wasn't it wasn't really holding tight. You know what I'm saying? So as I like, you know, flip the knife, and that energy, that shock is transferring, you know, throughout that pivot screw. You know, that screw is like becoming more and more loose, right? So there you go. All that black gunk is honestly, it looks more like grease or oil rather than Loctite. Loctite usually is like flaky. It's kind of a harder substance. This is more like an oily substance. So yeah. So I have to do it several times depending on how dirty the pivot screw is, because I'm getting a lot of this black gunk. I'm gonna have to keep doing it. I'm gonna fast forward through this, or I'm gonna kind of shorten this process. But essentially, you want to do this until you don't, you know, the paper towel is coming out clean, right? Okay, so now that I've done this for several minutes, several times, let me check, and it looks clean enough. It looks clean enough. As you know, you kind of compare when I first started to now, it's definitely a lot cleaner. So let's go ahead and move on. I think that was definitely the most, you know, time-consuming part of this whole process, because now everything else is just putting it back together. I like to use a blue Loctite and a Militech, so make sure you kind of the Militech. I know there's a lot of other knife like lubricants out there. I just use Militech. I don't know why. It's probably not better or worse than any other stuff that are out there. So I'll start with the show side. This is the captive pivot side, so I like to make sure. I'll just go ahead and put that in. Okay, easy peasy. And then let me go ahead and put in one of the bearings. Now, I like to go ahead and with this bearing, I just do a last check to make sure there's no other debris or any gunk on the bearings. Looks pretty good. Also, I like to make sure, you know, I try to put it in the same way that I took it out. I don't think it really matters, to be honest, but sometimes you won't even be able to tell, right? Anyway, so now I'm gonna go and put in a dab of the lubricant. Now the trick is you don't want to use too much. Now, you use too much, then it starts to gunk stuff up, right? So I'm just gonna put a tiny little dab on the bearing. Sometimes I'll put it on the blade, the surface area of the blade where that bearing is traveling. But I don't know, for today I just put it on the actual bearing. And also just make sure you don't get any oil inside of that pivot. I think that's going to prevent your Loctite from actually curing. So I like to be very careful. And so let's go ahead and stick in the bearing. See, I'm trying to be very careful that the oil is not getting into the hole. And there you go. All right. All right. Yep. See, I just dry out just in case. Never know. After that, I'll go ahead and put in the blade. See, I like to put in a dab, just a tiny little dab right there. See, where that bearing is going to be traveling. Honestly, if you put it on the blade, that surface area, you don't really even have to put lubricant on the actual bearings. You know, like I said, you don't need a lot of lubricant. You know, and there you go. I'm just kind of distributing the oil throughout the travel surface area. Now I'm gonna put a little dab on the other side. See, again, very little. See, that was a lot. I think that was a lot, but anyway, boom. See, I'm gonna rotate it through, get the oil in between. Now I put a little bit of oil on the detent hole, just so that the detent ball will be a little bit lubricated, but I don't like to put too much, to be honest. So there you go. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put on the other scale. Man, the Cortex XL is honestly one of the easiest knives to like maintain. It just comes together so easy. So there you go. It clicked in. Now I usually like to start with the body screw, so that it will kind of hold the knife together when I make adjustments to the pivot screw, right? So I'm just gonna go ahead and put it in. Now, when I first screw it in, I don't tighten it all the way, you know, and just make sure you don't cross thread the screw. Then you're gonna have a headache. So anyway, see, I just did it enough where it's just holding the knife together, so that I could now put in the pivot screw. So I like to, yeah. So let's see, what am I doing here? Okay, yeah, I forgot. I need to put on the Loctite. Again, you don't need a lot of Loctite. I usually like to just dab just enough to like cover like, maybe, 1/3 or half of the thread surface area. So I'll go ahead and put in my tool and then there you go. Okay, so let's see, just put in a dab, just a little bit, see, not even a lot. Okay, because if you put a lot, it's gonna overflow out into the pivot area and just becomes messy. And so there you go. Make sure that the handles are nicely sandwiched in together. Again, make sure you don't cross thread the screws, and then just go nice and slow. Go smooth. There you go. So mine's going in. And then I don't tighten it all the way, because from here, what I'll do is I'll kind of check to make sure everything kind of clicked in. Everything is. Now I'm going to go back and tighten up the body screw. All right. Now don't go crazy on it, right? You don't want to jack up the screw. So there you go. Just enough tension to know that it's in there nice and snug. Boom. So the body screw is good to go. Now check the action. Okay. Now this is where I make the fine-tune adjustments. I look for blade centering. And usually that's my first telltale sign that I need to adjust it if the blade centering is off. So I'm gonna go ahead and start to adjust it. And so now this is the balance between blade centering and like the feeling of the action, right? Because you want to make sure it's blade centered and you like the action, whether you like it stiff or a little bit more fluid. I think I'm liking it so far. It might be a little bit off-centered. Let me go ahead and feel that action again. Yeah, it's feeling pretty good. Oh, let me see. Is it solid lockup? Okay, I think I need to adjust it a little bit more, right? So this is just a lot of fine-tuning. It takes very like micrometers. You don't, at least from my experience, you make tiny little rotations that actually has big effect, right? So I'm checking for blade centering again. Okay, this looks pretty good, pretty good. Yeah, maybe a tinge of a more, there you go. Let's see, there you go. All right, check the action, lock up, right? So 3 things I look for: blade centering, action, and the lockup, right? So if the lockup is solid, the blade is more or less centered, and I like the action, then we're good to go. I'm checking that blade centering again. Looks pretty much there. Let me see. Okay, I think that's good to go. I'm doing a more closer inspection. Give me a second, guys. Okay, I think we're almost there, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, a little bit more adjustment. See, again, micro adjustments, just micro adjustments. There you go. And I think that is it right there. Check the action. Lockup looks good. Action is beautiful. Man, the Cortex XL is just a phenomenal knife. It is so good. Can make a little bit more adjustment. Tiny. Nice and easy. And boom, action is good. Lockup feels good. Blade centering looks fairly good. And I think we're good to go. So there you go. This is relatively, it's about a 30-minute process, depending on how much you need to clean. But yeah, usually it takes me about 20 to 30 minutes, and now I have a really awesome knife. Action is great, lockup is great, centering is good, and I am good to go. Thank you guys.